Hello, and welcome to FACT's webinar, The Wild Side of Farming, Managing Habitats for Farm-Friendly Wildlife. Our guest presenter is Danielle Crocker. I'm Samantha Gasson, FACT's Humane Farming Program Director, and I will be moderating this session. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive right in, let me take a minute or two to do a few quick introductions. Food Animal Concerns Trust, or FACT, is a national nonprofit organization that works to ensure that all food-producing animals are raised in a humane and healthy manner. We accomplish this by supporting humane farmers through our humane farming program, promoting policies that make foods from animals safe and healthy to eat through our Safe and Healthy Foods program, and generally help consumers make informed food choices. Please visit our website at foodanimalconcernstrust.org to learn more about all of our farmer services. As always, I'd like to introduce my wonderful colleague, Catherine Hoke, who will be in the wings. In case of any technical difficulties. Thank you so much, Catherine. At this time, I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed presenter, Danielle Crocker. Danielle is NCATS, which is the National Center for Appropriate Technology. It is appropriate, not attainable, right? Okay, I always get that messed up. Sustainable agriculture specialist for the Southeast and Appalachia region. She has always had a passion for natural resource conservation. She has worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Park Service, the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and the USDA Farm Service Agency. As a first-generation farmer, she's applied her education experiences to create a 100% woman-owned farm called Pick D's Berries. Her areas of specialization include agroforestry, silviculture, horticulture, floriculture, dairy goats, small fruits, and staying current in farm policies and opportunities. We are so lucky to have such a fantastic presenter with us to talk about integrating wildlife into your farming service systems. Without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Danielle so that she may begin her presentation. And I'm going to start a poll to get us going while Danielle gets herself situated. All right, there's the poll.
Can you see that okay? Is that in the right perspective?
Yep, perfect.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay. Let me just get myself fully situated here. All right. Should I be seeing these poll answers or have they all come back yet?
We're still getting people responding, so it looks like it's slowing down now. So, nope, that's still going. Do you want to just look at the poll in a few minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. It stopped. There you go. Sharing the results.
All right. All right. What type of wildlife are you most interested in supporting on your farm? Love to see a lot of birds and pollinators and beneficial insects. Small mammals, okay, 23%, cool. All of the above, almost 50%, love that as well. Other, 1%, I really want to know what that is. Feel free to put that in the chat, let me know. Let's see. Which areas of your farm do you currently or want to manage for wildlife? The field edges, hedgerows, love that. Those field edges are just easy getting right there. Ponds and wetlands. 61% woodland forest. Okay. Grassland pasture, 65%. Field crop integration. Yeah, that's a tricky one. Most people don't really want to integrate wildlife unless it's some sort of beneficial insect in those areas. And again, the 2% other, I look forward to knowing what those are. And what is your biggest challenge in managing wildlife habitats on your farm? Just the lack of knowledge of resources. Sure, you know, we have the internet at the tips of our fingers, but we are just inundated at all times with all kinds of information. So I will say I'm going to touch on that today, but even I won't fully fulfill that lack of knowledge. I wish I could, but we just don't have enough time to do it today. Time constraints, certainly never enough time. Balancing habitat with crop production, sure, 41%, almost 50% financial cost. Yeah, everything costs money. So if we can find some programs with the NRCS, that's the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to help implement some sort of practice that maybe directly or indirectly helps wildlife on your farm, then let's explore it. And then biggest challenge, we've got 7% other. Again, if you're in this other category, let me know what your other is, please. And with that, thank you so much for answering all of those poll questions. I really appreciate that. So, Sam, thank you so much. I just want to take a moment and thank our host, Sam, for having me present today. Like she mentioned, I am Danielle Crocker, and I am presenting the wild side of farming, managing these habitats for farm-friendly wildlife. And as you can see here, I was feeling a little wild. I got the wild eye in me that day. I just thought this was a funny one, and let me move forward in this presentation. Doesn't like it. There we go. Here we go. Who am I? Who am I? So I'm from the East Coast, and I come from a long line of fishing boat hillbillies from the great state of Maine. But I've spent the majority of my time in Western North Carolina, which is where I reside now. But I have spent some time in Colorado, Utah, and Alaska, but I am most fluent in East Coast habitats. I do have an associate's in fish and wildlife management, bachelor's in natural resources management with a focus on forestry. I am currently working towards my master's in organic agriculture. I will kind of skip this. Thanks for Sam. I've worked for a number of federal and state agencies, and I currently farm in Western North Carolina and work for NCAT. And perhaps the most important question of this slide is, what kind of fish is that? And that is a muskellunge, aka muskie. And why am I holding it? Because I caught this fish while working with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and we used her for a breeding program where we spawned, reared, and released game fish. And we did release her back to the wild after using her. So I'll just say real quick, this presentation will be guided by my small farm and life experiences, but I really want to know who you are and what your farm is like and what wildlife you're working with and maybe against. We're not really focusing on nuisance, but part of farm-friendly farm habitat, there's a nuisance. It's a slippery slope, right? So I'll try to leave enough time to address that today. And this webinar is going to be a little bit challenging, as I expect and saw that we are from all different parts of the United States, and every state and their farm have their own unique characteristics and wildlife. So your objectives, existing habitats, natural features on your property, the property size, and wildlife species present or desired will all be very different. And even though I have worked with a lot of different wildlife agencies, I am not an expert on every single piece of wildlife in the world. Not even close. But I can help the East Coast habitats or help us figure out how we can manage those habitats. I will say as well, We might not agree, not, excuse me, we might not all agree on methods of control or interest in pivoting our farm goals, but we are here to collaborate on ideas. So please be respectful of others' viewpoints. And the primary goals for today, this very short presentation, include providing practical strategies for farm-friendly habitats to promote biodiversity and ecosystem health, and just expose some of the incentives for enhancing your farm, and maybe perhaps inspire you to make some small changes. So the key principles of wildlife habitat: space, food, cover, shelter, water. Sounds like 5, but cover and shelter are used interchangeably. So getting into space, really, this comes down to how many acres do you have. So insert your farm here. If you're looking to support maybe a habitat specialist, that likely requires specific attributes from a habitat with the appropriate space. Most of us are probably going to lean toward habitat generalist. But if you are looking for habitat specialists, guys, maybe you can collaborate with your neighbors and their land, because a habitat specialist typically requires a lot of space. So it's good to know the surrounding land use. Is it commercial, residential, agriculture in some aspect, I assume? Do you have forest? Looking at Google Maps is a great way to see natural wildlife corridors, and you can play into those if you wish. Oftentimes, corridors run along the streams. They're often, forested buffers across the riparian area. So then there's food. What food sources do you have for wildlife, right? Native plants are ideal, right? They provide seed, pollen sources, nectar, berries, of which are of great interest for birds and pollinators. Maybe you have hard mass, which includes seeds like acorns and beech nuts. Maybe you have soft mass, which includes berries or fruits from, let's say, dogwoods or persimmons, or like my berry farm, blackberries, soft mass. Everyone most likely has some sort of herbaceous materials, including grasses, forbs, broadleaf plants, or maybe sedges. And maybe you have small prey sources. I kind of hope you do, which includes insects, invertebrates, small mammals, maybe. I don't know about you, but I definitely have field mice and rats. They're wildlife food sources, so we're going to explore that. And maybe you have aquatic invertebrates. Maybe you are blessed to have a river running through your farm. Do you have fish, clams, mussels, etc.? And then cover, right? What habitat types do you have and how much of each? Do you have a diverse landscape? Is it forested? Is it primarily hardwood, softwood, maybe a mix of like regenerating forest, scrubby, shrubby, or maybe you have some wetlands? That'd be cool. Most farms, if not all, contain open fields. But I'll strongly recommend, if you have fields on your land, implementing a diverse mowing and weeding rhythm. And we'll go into this further into this presentation. Diverse mowing and weeding considerations are a surefire way to help create a bit of diverse cover on the farm. So my farm is primarily composed of open fields. I'll show you some pictures in a minute, with alley cropping of scrub shrub. and a cluster of hardwoods. I often have multiple brush piles or temporarily unmanaged areas at various times of the year, which help serve as cover, especially through the winter. And then water. What do you have for water sources? If you have wetlands, you've got the water. Do you have a lake? Do you have a pond? Maybe just a little stream? Does it flow all year? My next door neighbor has a beautiful pond. And I know it attracts some really cool birds. I see them fly over to her pond and I get really jealous. But I'm so excited that it's just next door. It's a wonderful attribute to have near me. But here in my front yard, I've simply added a bird bath with a rocky bottom. Now, I don't expect to see a wood duck splashing in there, but for the purpose of providing a water resource simply for pollinators and more common birds, it's great. The pond next door probably is enough. They don't probably need my measly little bird bath, but I love that I get to witness these little creatures on a daily basis. So that's a small thing that's probably more for me than it is for them, but it certainly doesn't hurt anyone. So here we have a couple photos of my farm from two perspectives here. It is a humble berry and dairy goat farm. I'm working with 7 acres, and you can see here in this front picture, it's my little water station, aka bird bath in the first photo. So yeah, 7 acres. I don't expect to host quail, even though I'd really love to. I don't have enough land unless all my neighbors wanted to get together and make some quail habitat. It's just not realistic. So in reality, my wildlife goals are smaller, right? On my farm, I focus on creating, well, profits, if I'm being honest, right? But in the sheer pursuit of profits from the farm, I can help support more than just me. The berry side of the farm is basically one giant bird feeder. People ask me all the time, are birds a problem? A problem? No, not really. At least not yet. I mean, if a swarm of grackles, which is a type of bird that swarms together, you might have seen them, finds me more than once in the berry season, then yeah, possibly, and I'll have a nuisance. I haven't had that. I enjoyed the birds that I have, and my farm has never sounded more beautiful and full of life than it has in the past few years. I have enough to share, and I love sharing with them. I love finding nests in the alleys of the brambles. I keep honeybees to help pollinate my berries, even though I have wild ones coming in. And bumblebees do most of the work on my blueberries. And it brings me so much joy to see so much life benefiting from my farm additions. I also dabble in cut flowers. So boom, pollinator station galore. Even after the berries bloom, I happily host an attempt to attract beneficial insects and hummingbirds because they are arguably the coolest bird and pollinator. We can chat about it. And then there are purple martins, of which on that third picture I'm holding a purple martin that I think it had gotten its wing caught in some barbed wire fence, because other than a little laceration on its wing, it was fine. And I know I'm holding all these creatures, but I swear to you, I found them all on the ground. So purple martins and bats are primarily here for insect control, or at least I want them here for insect control. Even flying squirrels, which is that fourth picture, that's a baby flying squirrel that I found that had fallen out of its little nest. And they eat a lot of nocturnal insects. So as long as they aren't inside your home, I think they're great. And then by way of just living on any piece of land, wildlife doesn't ask if they can be there, right? So by default of just living in harmony with land, I have other wildlife species that I don't necessarily try to attract. I just have them. And you probably experience this as well. For me, it includes deer, foxes, snakes, skunks, and giant spiders like this. And yes, these photos are right here, are all from my farm. That is a very elusive trapdoor spider, and I've only ever seen one, and that's completely okay. I'll be okay if I never see another one. So foxes were a nuisance when I first tried to raise a small flock of free-range chickens. Didn't work out. Kept losing chickens to the foxes. So I made a pivot. I just made a pivot. I decided to keep the few chickens that I have, I keep them cooped up. They have a run and they get to run. And since then, foxes are no longer a problem for me. Even though right behind my goat barn, this picture was taken and they were just little foxes dilly-dallying in their little foxhole. And they're there almost every year. But since I just made a pivot of deciding to not raise chickens for a living, which I never really wanted to do, it's not been a problem. And the foxes really, they eat a lot of mice and rats, and that are most certainly on my farm. And skunks took refuge under my barn. I'm not thrilled about it, but they haven't had any negative impact from my experience. Now, if they were to burrow under my house, then yes, that would be a different story. And they actually eat a ton of grubs, which is of great benefit to me. So back to attracting farm-friendly wildlife, using artificial shelters like purple martin gourd houses. This is actually my second pole house on the farm. You can see the one in the background there. If you are interested in purple martins, I suggest putting these gourds or the purple martin houses up very soon because the scouts are typically here in Western North Carolina around mid-February. And then just bluebird boxes. Every year I try to hang a new one. I probably have 12 houses around the farm now. And since I had discovered that fallen flying squirrel nest, I added a flying squirrel box to the property, and they actually use it. I rarely get to see them, but sometimes I see their little face poking out of that, and it just brings me so much joy. I love it. They eat little night insects. I don't know if I mentioned that, but they're so wonderful. Again, as long as they're not in your house, right? And then there's bat houses. In the wintertime, I like to just do some little carpentry things. I built these 2 bat boxes, and they have entertained some bats. They are especially important for eating those insects of the night. And of course, you can always add some easy artificial solitary insect habitat, which is what these really unimpressive blocks of wood are. I just used an extra little piece of 4x4. I drilled some holes into it, place it wherever it fits. And you can make them out of sticks like this last picture here too. I promise they will attract the little solitary insects. It's really fascinating. And then perhaps one of my favorite yet more aggressive beneficial insects is the praying mantis. So from January to early March, I'll usually take a day to scout for some praying mantis in early successional habitat. So when I say early successional habitat, thinking like really scrubby, shrubby, brambly look to it, real messy. It's an excellent winter scavenger hunt for children and adults. They eat a slew of insects on the farm, and I personally enjoy seeing them hatch and just having them. And so now moving on to maybe some more natural habitats on the farm. So, like I mentioned, the farm naturally, at least my farm naturally provides food and shelter and some space for wildlife. The blooms from the berries and adding those flower gardens are perfect for pollinators. The berries equal food to wildlife. The elderberry are probably the one thing I do to fight the birds more than any other berry on the farm. But I still walk away with the lion's share of those berries as long as I'm harvesting before they get a little too ripe. So when it comes to my alleys of blackberries, due to their nature, I remove all the spent canes before the new canes flower. I tend to do this either very slowly over winter or wait until very late winter, early spring. I do this for two reasons. One, I'm a little lazy in the wintertime, but it works out because it provides habitat through the winter for birds and insects. You can see on this first slide, you see the rows, and then above these rows, it looks real weedy and wild like, and I'll leave these little patches of just wild areas on my farm throughout the summer, throughout the fall, throughout the winter, and I'll just randomize where the next one's going to go. I'll just let the weeds kind of grow up a little bit for a few months. They're just great little pollination stations. So speaking of being lazy, in late August, there are parts of my farm I just don't mow. Like I was just saying, leaving those little areas. I just allow it to be maybe until late May or so. I'll just remind you, it is often the messiest part of your farm that provides the most beneficial habitat for wildlife. So I've given you some small examples of what I like to do on my farm, but I want to turn it back around to you and your farm. Maybe make a quick mental list, or if you are looking to purchase a place, here's a good way to start thinking about moving forward. And the key principles of habitat management include site assessment, native species promotion, invasive species control, of which we will dive just a little deeper into right now. Site assessment is the key, right, to understanding the specific ecological conditions and needs of an area. It allows you to identify your existing resources and maybe potential threats. And the suitability management strategies tailored to the site's unique characteristics. Assessments help in just setting realistic goals, ensuring effective resource allocation, and avoiding unintended negative impacts. They facilitate monitoring and adaptive management by just providing that baseline data. You know your farm best, so get that data in. Native species promotion, right? Using native species in habitat management is very essential for supporting local ecosystems. Native plants are adapted to the region's climate, the soil, and wildlife, right? And they promote biodiversity by providing food and habitat for local species. They enhance the soil and water conservation as their deep root systems usually prevent erosion and improve water infiltration. Additionally, native plants require fewer resource inputs such as water and fertilizers, thus reducing maintenance and environmental impact. Their use fosters ecosystem resilience and stability for sustaining local flora and fauna. Invasive species. What are invasive species? It's a species that adversely affects habitats and bioregions, causing ecological, environmental, or economic damage. The term can also be used for native species. You can have an invasive native species and that would become harmful to their native environment after most likely human alterations to its food web. So strategies for invasive species control include early detection and monitoring, mechanical removal, biological control, restoration of just native vegetation, followed by public education, following policy and regulation enforcement. Curbing the spread of invasives helps protect the integrity of native habitats and ensures the survival of native plants and animals. Now, I personally do have a bit of a moral dilemma with some invasive species. There are some invasive species that I am not as worried about, and maybe you feel that way too. Maybe you don't, right? Now, if there was some kudzu sprouting out in my yard, I'd have a little freak out and I'd get rid of it immediately. But I think in some instances, you can work with invasive species. And if you already have them, if you have the option to work with them, I would go that route. But I'll say Lespedeza is a perfect example. If you have it, it's very difficult to get rid of. But you know what it's great for? It's excellent forage for goats. I'm biased because I raise goats. I know that. But just a thought. So your farm, your choice, my opinion. Yes, the importance of habitat management. So it directly addresses the needs of wildlife and plant species by preserving and improving the living conditions, right? It helps prevent habitat loss, maybe fragmentation, which are major threats to biodiversity. And by maintaining diverse and healthy ecosystems, habitat management supports species resilience to environmental changes, such as climate change and natural disasters. It also enhances ecosystem services like water purification, soil stabilization, and carbon sequestration. Ultimately, effective habitat management ensures the long-term survival of species and the integrity of ecosystems, contributing to global conservation efforts and sustainable natural resource use, both benefiting biodiversity and human communities, right? So with all that, I will now briefly touch on a couple of programs and initiatives with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I will say, if you are not involved with your local NRCS or FSA, which is the Farm Service Agency, I do highly recommend you register your farm as soon as possible. At the very least, with FSA, the Farm Service Agency, because they are the gateway for NRCS programs. And you can easily look up your local FSA or NRCS branch contact. So the first program here is the Conservation Reserve Program, also known as the CRP. It does provide yearly payments to farmers who remove, I don't mean to use air quotes, but environmentally sensitive land from agricultural production. The problem could be a problem. Maybe it's not to you, but most people find it to be a problem that the contracts are typically 10 to 15 years long. That's a long time to not be able to use a slice of your land. However, most people I know will put their riparian buffers, the land just outside of their creeks or rivers, in CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program, because it's usually not good practice to use that land right next to your creeks anyway. It's a good thing to do if you have the resources to do that. The next one is environmental quality incentive programs. This is the flagship conservation program that helps farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners integrate conservation into working lands, right? So it is the most common program utilized in my area, at least. And then, so on top of those, continuing into some environmental incentives, right, are some climate, what they're calling climate smart agricultural and forestry mitigation activities. This is kind of the star of the show for this presentation, in my opinion. Even though it's not a very cute slide. Because you can use these practices in working lands, it means that you are potentially going to get paid out to either continue these practices or implement these practices. Usually it's implementing these practices, right? So on here, you'll see a couple of these have asterisks on them. Those are current strategies that I'm either already applying on my land or I am currently applying to, all of which seem very specific, but are very beneficial for ecosystem health and are incentivized for exactly that reason, right? So alley cropping, my blackberries, I'm adding truffle trees in between the blackberries, like within the blackberries, and then in each row, I'm adding cover crops, mulching, forest farming. I'm starting a little forest farming area or a little prescribed grazing. We're always trying to improve that. And prescribed grazing can be tailored towards wildlife as well. So these practices and many, many more are available for you to check out with the NRCS, or there are quite a few nonprofits that are working on climate smart agriculture plans. So if you made a quick Google of such a thing, you're more than likely going to find someone in your area that has been funded by the USDA to also implement a lot of these practices. It's really worth checking out. And then one more that's just a little more wildlife specific. These are more for like targeted species and tailored to those regions of their habitat or migrational patterns. So, you've got the greater sage grouse, lesser prairie chicken, gopher tortoise, golden winged warbler, the southwestern willow flycatcher, monarch butterflies. And then you've got this, the WLFW, right? Working lands for wildlife. There you have other state identified projects. I do know for North Carolina, it does contain properties that have like really beautiful rivers and streams that contain hellbenders, which are North America's largest salamander. And here in Western North Carolina, we do have quite a few of them. But there are incentives if you had those on your property to keep them there and to keep them healthy and happy. So again, this is really just the tip of the iceberg for a lot of programs out there. But I will say that last slide, that Climate Smart, it's a really good one for a lot of working farms. And then here are just some other resources if you were interested in looking up maybe invasive plants on your property, maybe you don't know. Or if you want to learn more about native gardening, Forest Service has some really great information out there, as well as the National Wildlife Federation for native plants, or just how to control if you have invasive species that you're trying to get rid of, how to control them. And then I'm actually just going to leave this slide up because my next slide is the last slide. So I'm just going to say thanks for your time. And if you have questions, now is the time. Thanks, Sam.
I love it. And actually, I put a link to the slides multiple times in the chat. And so you can just go directly there and click on them. And I did put some of the links in the chat for the specific programs. So we actually have quite a few questions. So Danielle, if you want to go ahead and unshare your screen, or is there a good way for people to contact you? Do you want to put that in the chat?
Sure.
Contact you. And then also, yes, if you guys want to go ahead and start formulating your questions, put them in the Q&A, and we will be answering those in just a few seconds. But I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, to answer this end of webinar poll. It helps us with our funding and also reporting out to our funders who keep these webinars free for you guys. So that is very, very helpful. And it's also good information for Danielle, because I'll share it with her. All right. So are you ready to start answering questions, Danielle?
Yeah. Made this too large. I don't like that. All right.
And Catherine, if you wouldn't mind going back and forth with me, I'm getting over a cold and my voice is making my throat a little funny and I keep coughing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Let's just go back and forth on them. So Donna asks, what are examples of habitat specialists?
Sure. That would be things more like quail, greater sage grouse, the prairie chickens, maybe
no, I think habitat specialists, people who specialize in habitats. It was one of the first slides.
Oh, so yeah, maybe there was some confusion on that. But yeah, a habitat specialist is a critter or creature that requires special habitat, not like a deer, really, because they can live pretty much anywhere, right? They're more of a generalist. Or a raccoon. Raccoons can live almost anywhere. Bears seem to do the same thing. They're perfectly fine not living in a dumpster, but hanging around downtown Asheville and just being there. Whereas like a greater sage grouse or a lesser prairie chicken, those guys require real special habitat. Or even the monarchs, their caterpillars only eat asclepias, right? Milkweed. That's it. They're a specialist on milkweed as far as their babies go. So yeah, that would be a specialist.
Our next question is, you mentioned that you need a lot of land to attract quail. About how much?
Oh, that's a good question. And I don't know what the quote for the acreage is lately. It's been a few years since I've looked at it. But if memory serves me well, you need like 30 plus acres to really have good coveys of quail.
Okay, Jennifer asks, or I think it's more of a comment, but I think it's a really valid comment. I had a lot of praying mantises on my farm, but realized last year that the type I have is the non-native Chinese type that are mean and horrible and kill everything. She didn't say that. I added that last part. That supposedly is very hard on native insects. So last year I tried destroying the egg masses when I found them. And just as a follow-up on that, can you tell us the difference between the native and the Chinese praying mantis, and do their egg sacs look different? Because their egg sacs look different as well, don't they?
Great questions. Yes. Jennifer, you're correct. And the picture now, the pods that I collected, I know for a fact are the non-native Chinese type. So shame on me. I know it. The picture of the adult praying mantis that I had, I'm not 100% sure. It could be a Carolina and it could be the non-native one. That one I'm not a specialist on, but I was curious too.
So I think the Chinese ones are green and the native ones are brown.
Yeah, the Chinese ones though, they do have a variant of gray ones too sometimes. Um, and you can tell the difference of their egg sacs really easily. I think I wish I had a picture, but they're more oval and they have a like a black circle inside of the oval. They're really distinct compared to those big puffy styrofoam ones that you saw on my slide. Yeah, that's if you don't want them, destroy them. That's your farm, your choice, girl.
I love it. I just did a Google search and I will share it in the chats so you guys can.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Our next question is, does knocking down trees with machinery kill adjacent trees? Trying to thin for habitat, and skid steer is a lot faster than chainsaw, but afraid that I might be killing nearby trees.
That's a good question, and I really think, Kim, that it probably depends on the operator. Now, if you are putting a skid steer in there, that is going to be a heavy load on your soil and your roots, and so it will probably stress out neighboring trees, even if you don't smash into those trees with any equipment or other trees. Um, I'm not going to say it's going to kill your trees. It really just depends on the operator and how sensibly aware they are. Um, but yeah, it is a lot faster. I get it. So just proceed with caution.
And just to follow up on that, we actually just had somebody, we're creating some silver pastures, so we got rid of some of our scrubby trees and everything, and we had somebody who was very experienced, and he did not damage any of the larger trees that we wanted to keep.
Love it.
Valerie asked, does NRCS support dead hedging?
I'm going to be honest. I don't quite understand what dead hedging is.
Me neither.
Valerie, if you could follow up in the Q&A, maybe put in teach us what is dead hedging.
Yes. Thanks, Valerie.
Okay, so let's see. What makes a farm? I'm just starting changing woods to silviculture, sheep and poultry. Can I just call my property a farm and register it with FSA?
Oh gosh, yeah. If you are, so I work for the Farm Service Agency, and we got this question a lot. And if think about it this way, if you had a quarter of an acre and you raised a couple hives of honeybees, you're producing livestock at that point, which is producing a value-added product. You are 100% a farm. So yeah, especially if you are producing sheep and poultry and trees on top of that, farm all the way. Get it registered with the FSA. Do it today.
All right. Claire
And we
asked,
had someone in the chat say what dead hedging was, by the way, because I was very curious. Piling up dead wood to form a hedge. And
Oh,
someone says, I call that a brush fence. Yeah.
I love it. I love it when we can learn stuff from presenters learn stuff from the audience. I love it. It happens a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Claire asks, can you give some examples of invasive species you like to utilize on your farm or know of others utilizing on their farms?
yeah. So that Lespedeza was really my go-to invasive species plant to use because it's high in protein for goats, and it acts as a natural wormer for your goats as well. Oh man, like some people see a field of Lespedeza and they get so mad at it, but
Oh no, I love
I see
it.
possibilities and happy goats. Another one would be kudzu. Honestly, it actually has more protein in it than anyone gives it credit for. And again, I'm biased because I raise goats. I would, if I had access to a kudzu field, boy, you betcha I'd put them in.
Well, Lespedeza is actually good for, we have sheep and cows, and it's good for them as well. And I have a question. This is actually not, nobody asked this. I'm asking this. So and I always feel guilty about this, but we have butterfly bushes, but we have and I know they're invasive, and so don't hate on me, but they are amazing for the butterflies. We raise so many swallowtails, and the adults feed off of those. I mean, we control them. They're not out of control, maybe a little bit, but still. So even if somebody doesn't, like you were saying earlier, if you like it and it works for you, then use it. I mean, I think there's quite a few people who would look down their noses at me knowing that I have butterfly bushes all over my farm.
Are a very controversial topic as well. A lot of because they do kill a lot of native critters. I don't personally have a cat, my neighbor does, but those guys are down here killing mice and rats, amongst the other things, all the time. Am I mad at them? No.
This next question is for someone from a nonprofit conservation organization looking to connect with farmers. Do you have any ideas for the best way to engage or connect with farmers to share resources or find out what they need for specific wildlife? Are there good national or local partnerships or collaborative organizations of farmers? I think there are a lot of different answers to that.
There are, yeah. Now I'm just curious. I wonder if they're saying so from someone from a nonprofit. They're saying that they work for a nonprofit.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think just reaching out and connecting with other nonprofits who are sharing your goals and missions is probably one of the better ways to start. Just saying hi, just touching base.
Yep, someone in the chat is also saying local FFA and 4-H groups are great as well.
Yeah, and your local extension agent, they often have a plethora of information like that and gatherings. So that might be a good place to go and check that out.
All right, and somebody wants me to repost the poll, but unfortunately, if I do that, I erase everybody else's results. So I can't do that. I'm very sorry. But if you want to email me, I'll tell you what it is, and I can add them and add in your adding your questions manually. All right. So sorry about that. Okay. What do you recommend for trees for silvopasture?
Oh, my go-to are honey locust, black locust, and mulberry. And I'm gonna add persimmon in there. I say honey locust and black locust specifically because they are a nitrogen fixer, and they also create these soft mass pods, right? So they're full of sugars and protein for your livestock to eat, and then your soil is getting nitrogen. And then both of those have really beautiful, wonderful smelling, sought after blooms for pollinators. So it makes great honey. And then, of course, persimmon and mulberry because it has lots of protein in those leaves. And they also do make a fruit. And then I like persimmons because they hold that soft mass fruit into late stages of fall. So that gives boost to your livestock right before winter.
We also have some other webinars about silvopasture if you want to get into more details on that. We just did a recent one with Trees for Grazers about silvopasture for poultry, where they have more specific recommendations on that too. So
And I will send those in the follow-up email because we have Silvopasture 101 and we have a bunch with Steve Gabriel as well. We've got quite a few, but I'll send them in the follow-up. We actually are down to the last 3 minutes. So let's, yeah, Catherine, do you want to pick out maybe one more question? And then I will share my screen and we'll do sort of our end of webinar thing.
Oh man, choosing. Oh,
I know, it's so hard.
no.
There's some fantastic questions.
Do you have any recommendations for straightforward on-farm biodiversity assessment and tracking? That
I don't. Oh, and I just went to right before the hurricane, I went to a meeting and I just cannot remember what their website was called because they had a really great assessment and tracking tool. And I'm so sorry. I cannot remember the name of that right now.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze one more question in here then. How do you balance native species, like planting native grasses, with what your sheep will actually eat? They say big blue stem, some sheep don't like. So how do you balance your native species with what your sheep will actually eat?
I am not sure. Sam, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's no point planting something in an area where you want to graze your sheep if they're not going to eat it. Because then that means you're going to be, so maybe if you've got another area like a riparian buffer, near a stream that you don't let your animals in, you could plant it there, or you could choose other native species that maybe would attract pollinators and do some other things. But yeah, you don't want to plant anything your animals won't eat because that'll just cost you money.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
All right. I mean, wildlife is great now, but you've got to be able to feed your animals. So,
Right.
a few housekeeping items to share before we sign off today. You guys have been fantastic. The chat was just so much fun today. A recording of this webinar and the slides will be available within the next few days. These documents will be archived on our website, and I will email them to you all today, or well, it won't be today, it'll be tomorrow. We also have some other good webinars coming up for the winter and the spring. Not all of them have been finalized, but we do have one about contracting out your goats so that they can clear other people's lands. It's from Goats on the Go. And I will send links to all of our upcoming webinars and other opportunities for farmers and ranchers in a follow-up email. A sincere thank you to you, Danielle. It's been a pleasure. And finally, I would like to thank everyone out there in the audience for their interest, attention, and really, really good questions and fantastic comments. So much knowledge in this crowd. I just love it. I hope that you had a good experience today and that we will stay in touch and connect again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now, everybody.